I'm picking up right where it left off. Because in my mind, that's exactly how it unfolded. Put the gun down, Mara, I said. Not a yell, not a plea, just firm. The way you speak, when your gut already knows something's about to explode. The response wasn't words. It was light. A blinding white flare at the barrel's end. Then a noise so sharp it felt like it punched the air straight from my lungs. The crack tore the evening apart. Birds shot from the trees in every direction. Behind me, my wife screamed, raw and jagged, a sound that didn't belong in a suburban street lined with tidy lawns and polite nods, ricocheting off the porch post like shrapnel that tore across my arm. For a heartbeat, time froze. No yelling, no movement, just the acrid smell of gunpowder and the ragged rhythm of her breathing, quick and uncertain, like she couldn't decide between sobbing or passing out. That's when it hit me how fragile the line is between neighborly rules and criminal charges. And yes, we'll get to how it spiraled, but hold that thought, because this story won't make sense unless you understand one key thing. This wasn't about the gun. It was about control. Let's rewind. 2 hours before, the sun still hung lazily overhead. That kind of afternoon where everything feels harmless, like the world is aligned, with matching mailboxes and friendly smiles. I just turned into the driveway when Mara Henshaw shoved a folded citation into my chest before I could fully step onto the porch. No greeting, no warning, just paper and attitude. You've been warned twice, Mr. Hale, she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut glass. That swing violates community symmetry, and your wife is sitting on it again. She delivered it like she'd caught us committing some grave crime. The porch swing, a piece of wood and chain I built myself, was treated like a weapon in her eyes. Mara was the president of the Willow Creek Ridge HOA, and she carried the title like armor, chest out, chin high, clipboard angled perfectly so everyone could see she was in charge. Questions weren't her thing. Commands were. I noticed a slight quiver in her lips, just enough to hint at human vulnerability. But it didn't soften her tone. If anything, it sharpened it. Remove it by sunset, she said, or maintenance will. I looked down at the paper fluttering between us and thought how strange it was that a neighborhood designed for peace could feel so hostile over something so small. I set the citation down on the railing, deliberate. That swing is anchoring concrete. I said, it's not coming down without a permit. Her expression flickered, tiny, involuntary, because she hadn't expected resistance, and definitely not that I knew the difference between HOA rules and private property. People like Mara live off assumption. The assumption that nobody will question, that authority doesn't need proof if it sounds official. She leaned in, pen tapping the clipboard like a heartbeat. Rules don't bend for sentiment, she said. Your title doesn't matter here. Emphasis on here made it clear. This porch, this street, this tiny bubble was her court, and she was a judge. Behind me, my wife Lena stood, hand on the railing, the other on her 7-month belly, pale but steady. That swing wasn't decoration. It was survival, a symbol of hope after a miscarriage 3 years earlier. The first thing I built that allowed her to step outside, without breaking down, the place she'd sit at sunset, feeling the breeze and whispering it felt like hope again. When we moved to Willow Creek Ridge, she smiled for the first time in months, ran her hand along the armrest I'd sanded smooth, and whispered, no one's taking this from us. Now she looked at me and said quietly, I'm not moving. No defiance, no drama, just a line drawn. Mara laughed, brittle and dry, not reaching her eyes. Then maybe you'll understand consequences the hard way. She stepped closer, heels scraping wood, perfume sharp and chemical. That's when my body slowed. Old instincts surfaced, the ones that never leave you, even after trading a badge for a suit. My gaze dropped to the bulge under her jacket, the wrong angle, the unmistakable outline. A compact handgun, poorly concealed, holster for feeling powerful, not prepared. You're shaking, I said low calm. You don't want to do this. Don't tell me what I want, she hissed. The world narrowed attention and nerves. Lena stepped back. Clipboard hit the floor. Metal scraped leather. Everything after that happened too fast and too slow at once. The draw, the flash, the bang, the impact. Lena cried out, clutching her shoulder, blood already seeping. I was across the porch in seconds, pressing my hand to the wound, assessing without thinking. Shallow lucky. I looked at Mara. Finally, the realization hit her. Not a rule enforced, not a citation issued, but a gun fired. You just discharged a firearm on private property. I said, voice flat, you're done. She stammered something about self-defense, feeling threatened, but the words fell apart mid-air. Across the cul-de-sac, blinds shifted. Phones appeared, then disappeared. Neighbors deciding whether to witness or ignore. Burnt would send at the air where the bullet nicked a porch post. A permanent mark on something harmless. Sirens wailing as Mara fled. Heels snapping. SUV peeling out like she could escape what she'd done. Deputies arrived, young, nervous. Eyes flicking between my wife's wound and the badge on the porch table. One recognized me, went pale. She needs medical attention, I said. Not debate. They did their jobs. Photos, angles, a slug in the wood. Neighbors fell silent, and that silence stung worse than the gunshot. At the hospital, a nurse cleaned the wound. Half an inch deeper, she said, stopping. Lena squeezed my hand, smiled weakly. Luck had nothing to do with it, she said. That night, I stared at the ceiling and understood what Mara never would. Power isn't a clipboard or rules or fines. It's people believing you have it. And the moment that belief is questioned, the whole illusion collapses. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Pause here, because now the story stops being just wild and becomes a lesson. Most learn it too late. An HOA isn't law enforcement. It cannot threaten, detain, carry weapons, or enforce anything with force, no matter how official the clipboard looks, or how many capitalized emails it sends. From a legal standpoint, an HOA's power exists only on paper. Charters, bylaws, insurance, proper authority, strict boundaries. Step outside that framework, and suddenly they aren't enforcers of rules. They're just individuals making demands. And that's where things turn dangerous, because someone like Mara, when she feels her grip loosening, doesn't retreat. She escalates. It's a psychological trap. Power without accountability breeds entitlement. Entitlement mutates into paranoia. And paranoia convinces people they're justified in doing things they'd normally never imagine, like bringing a gun to a porch argument about a swing. The second she felt challenged, not physically, but symbolically, her brain rewrote the story. From I'm enforcing rules to I'm under threat. That's how ego masquerades as fear. The lesson is uncomfortable, but simple. When rules are wielded by those who crave control more than order, rules shift from safety to dominance. And when that happens, everyone is at risk, even the quietest, most picture-perfect neighborhood. The next morning, we returned, and the porch looked like a crime scene desperately pretending it wasn't. Yellow tape fluttered where the bullet had nicked the post, though it still smelled faintly of smoke and antiseptic. And on the mailbox, taped neatly, was another HOA notice. Fresh ink, bold letters. Unsafe structural addition. Immediate removal required. Lena read it twice, then looked at me, not angry, just exhausted. They're trying to erase it, she said. I shook my head. No, I told her. They're documenting their own mistake. By noon, Mara was still missing, but the board hadn't paused. Marilyn Cross, the HOA treasurer, appeared with 2 board members, clipboards in hand, polite smile stretched too tight. We're here to assess liability, she said, eyes scanning the porch like it had committed a crime. Calmly, I explained that if a board member fires a gun during enforcement, their insurance is suddenly very interested, assuming they had any. That was the first time I saw real fear flicker across her face, just for a heartbeat, like someone realizing the floor beneath them wasn't solid. That night, while Lena slept, I opened my laptop and did what Mara never expected. I checked the HOA's paperwork, account registry, corporate filings, insurance verification, boring, tedious stuff that those in power assume no one will scrutinize. Willow Creek Ridge, HOA Incorporated. Status. Expired. No renewal. No updated officers. No insurance on file. Nothing. The authority they brandished like a weapon had quietly vanished months ago, unnoticed because no one bothered to ask. Fake power works beautifully until it doesn't. The next morning, I stepped onto the porch with cold coffee, carrying that knowledge like a weight. Across the street, an older man pretended to check his phone, slouched, hands buried in jacket pockets. Carl Whitman, former deputy, retired HOA board member, man who looked like sleepless nights had claimed him. He crossed the street cautiously, as if the porch itself might judge him. "I heard your wife's recovering," he said quietly. I nodded, silence stretching between us. Then he muttered, "She shouldn't have had that weapon. There's a lot she shouldn't have had." "Including authority," I replied. His gaze sharpened. "Really?" I explained what I discovered. Expired charter, no insurance, no standing. His face drained the color. "You're saying everything we've done for months is void?" he asked. "I'm saying it never legally existed," I said. He exhaled, guilt bubbling up. All the meetings he'd attended, letters signed, nods given, comfortable, not malicious. By afternoon, the HOA doubled down. Another notice, this time taped directly to the swing chain, signed by Marilyn. That's when I drove to the clubhouse. Fluorescent lights, fake plants, filing cabinets stacked with paper authority. Marilyn smiled when she saw me. "Outstanding fines," she said. Calmly, I asked why she was still issuing fines for an entity that didn't legally exist. Her pen froze. I slid the registry printout across the desk. "Status. Expired. Consider this notice," I said. She tried to bluff, claiming they'd fixed the paperwork, an administrative hiccup. I told her administrative hiccups don't retroactively legalize fraud. As I left, I could almost hear her mind racing, deciding what to shred first. Things accelerated quickly after that. I called a detective handling Lena's case, simply documenting reality. By the next day, whispers circulated. Neighbors who had never waved suddenly nodded. Carl returned that evening, heavier this time, meeting me by the lake at dusk, shoulders hunched, carrying a confession. "It's worse," he said. The board hadn't just skipped renewal. They deliberately skipped insurance to save money. HOA dues funneled through a vendor account tied to Marilyn's husband. Fake invoices, personal expenses, quiet theft masquerading as maintenance. He handed me a flash drive filled with records, emails, meeting minutes. "I can't stay silent," he said, voice cracking. "Then don't," I said. The filing was surgical. Emergency injunction exhibits, expired charter, insurance lapse, financial misappropriation. No emotion, just dominoes lined up. The hearing wasn't cinematic, just a small room with flickering lights. The HOA lawyer came in confident, called it personal vendetta, clerical errors. The judge flipped through documents, paused, then looked up. "Reinstatement doesn't retroactively authorize illegal action," he said. "Preliminary injunction granted. All HOA enforcement frozen." Just like that, the board's authority evaporated. News spread fast. Blue envelopes with the county seal landed in mailboxes like quiet little explosions. Confusion rippled into anger. By evening, neighbors had gathered near the gazebo, murmuring, asking the questions they'd been too afraid to voice before. Marilyn tried to spin it, calling it temporary. But when Carl stepped forward and laid out the truth, the energy shifted. You could feel it. The fear draining away, replaced by something sharper, more certain. Mara arrived late, arm in a sling, playing the injured party, until someone said the word gun aloud. Silence fell heavy and final. By the time the formal audit began, it was already over. Funds traced, charges pending. The board crumbled under its own weight. That night, as the community voted to rebuild, I sat on the porch with Lena. The swing creaked softly, no longer defiant, just existing. She leaned against me and said, "You didn't just stop them." I watched the moon's reflection on the lake and replied, "No, I reminded them that the law still matters." Here's what most people don't realize when they move to a neighborhood with manicured lawns, matching fences, and a thick HOA handbook. Authority rarely arrives with shout. It arrives quietly, wrapped in rules, smiling, claiming it's for your own good. The lesson isn't that HOAs are inherently evil. Most aren't. Most start with decent intentions. Shared maintenance order, someone to call when the lights go out. Problems emerge when authority ceases to be a responsibility and becomes an identity. When someone needs the rules more than the rules need them, enforcement becomes personal. And that's when management slides into control. Legally, homeowners often forget one crucial fact. An HOA is a corporation, not some permanent, untouchable institution. Like any corporation, it survives on compliance. Charters expire, insurance lapses, officers fail to file renewals. When that happens, the HOA doesn't just weaken, it becomes legally hollow. By standard procedure, an association without standing cannot issue fines, cannot enforce, cannot threaten, and cannot pretend authority into existence just because no one checks. Most boards rely on one thing more than money or lawyers: silence. As long as homeowners assume someone else verified the paperwork, no one ever does. It's a psychological trap, especially in quiet neighborhoods. People don't want to be the neighbor who complains, rocks the boat, or challenges the system. So they swallow small injustices, fines here, warnings there, until fear becomes routine. That's how untested power grows. Not because it's legitimate, but because it goes unchallenged. Once fear is normalized, even obvious overreach feels inevitable. The moment someone questions it, the illusion cracks. Not with yelling, not with violence, but with boring, meticulous verification. The kind of work nobody wants to do, but that benefits everyone when it's finally done. Willow Creek Ridge didn't start with a gun. It started months earlier with unchecked authority and paperwork no one bothered to read. The gun was just the moment the mask slipped. The real damage wasn't the splintered wood or hospital visit. It was realizing an entire community had outsourced its backbone to a handful of people who were never meant to hold it. When the truth came out, the power didn't shift to me. It returned where it belonged, to the residents who finally understood that rules only work when grounded in law, not ego. So, if you live under an HOA, here's my advice. Not as a lawyer, not as a judge, but as someone who learned the hard way. Read the bylaws, check filings, ask uncomfortable questions, and don't mistake politeness for compliance. Authority that crumbles under scrutiny doesn't deserve obedience. And if you serve on a board, remember, leadership isn't about how forcefully you enforce rules. It's about wielding the power entrusted to you with care. Once trust is lost, no amount of paperwork can restore it. I'm not telling this to scare anyone, and I'm certainly not encouraging conflict. Most of the time, you don't need one. You just need awareness. Because the moment you understand how fragile false authority really is, it stops being intimidating. It becomes something you can confront calmly, legally, effectively. And yes, sometimes that starts with something as simple as a porch swing. If you've ever faced HOA overreach, or if you're holding a story you thought no one would listen to, drop it in the comments. I read more than you think. And so do many others who feel just as boxing as you once did. And if you want more stories like this, where everyday situations turn into lessons about power, law, and human behavior, hit subscribe. These conversations don't end when the video stops. They're just getting started.